Good afternoon. National Assembly of Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon questions the First Minister. And question 1, Alan Fred Jones.
Diolch yn fawr. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am rôl yr iaith Gymraeg yn y broses cynllunio.
Wel, dylai pob awdurdod cynllunio lleol ystyried y Gymraeg wrth baratoi a'i cynlluniau datblygu lleol. Mae'n bwysig wrth gwrs bod y system cynllunio yn cyfrannu at gefnogi'r iaith a mae tan hugain yn adlewyrchu hynny.
Diolch yn fawr. Mae cynigion y Llywodraeth yn y bil cynllunio parthed y Gymraeg i'w croesawu nad ydyn nhw'n datblygu fawr ddim ar nodyn cyngor technegol 20 fel y cyfeirio chi rwan. Pam nad yw'r Llywodraeth yn barod i sicrhau bod y Gymraeg yn cael yr un ystyriaeth mewn astudiaethau ardrawiad ar amgylchedd neu iechyd mewn rhai ceisiadau cynllunio penodol?
Wel, ni'n agored wrth gwrs i unrhyw drafod ynglyn â mha ffordd gallai gael ei ymarferol. Ac wrth gwrs, wrth gofio'r ffaith byddai rhaid talu am hwnna, byddai rhaid i'r person sy'n rhoi cais mynd i dalu am hwnna, a hefyd pwy byddai yn neud unrhyw fath o asesiad a beth byddai'r methodoleg. Wrth ystyried y pethau ymarferol yna, ni'n digon parod wrth gwrs i ystyried ym mha ffordd gallai y system cynllunio i gario ymlaen i rhoi cymorth i'r Gymraeg.
Diolch Llywydd. Wel, Prif Weinidog, chi wedi sôn am y gair ymarferol yna. Pob tro fi wedi gofyn i chi yma yn y cyfarfod llawn am hyn. Chi wedi gweud unrhyw cymorth i'r iaith dylai hyn fod yn ymarferol yn y bil cynllunio. Yn ystod cyfnod 2 o'r bil, gwrthododd y Gweinidog pob gwelliant yr wrthbleidiau a oedd yn cynnig atebion ymarferol ynghylch â ceisiadau cynllunio. Ydych chi'n fodlon heddi i weid bod y Llywodraeth yn fodlon i dod ymlaen gyda gwelliannau hunan i sicrhau bod rhai o'r ymatebion ymarferol yn dod trwyddo gyda cyfnod 3?
Wel, ni wedi gwneud hynny, wrth gwrs. Ni wedi symud ymlaen ynglyn â'r Gymraeg a'r system cynllunio. Yn nod i wrth gwrs sicrhau bod unigolion ddim yn gorfod wneud rhyw fath o asesiad ynglyn â'r iaith Gymraeg, bydd yn ormodol yn fy marn i, a hefyd stopo datblygwyr lle mae eisiau falle iddyn nhw i ddatblygu stad o dau newydd i dorri lawr y ceisiadau cynllunio mewn i 3 neu 4 cais mwyn dod o dan unrhyw llinell allai fod yn y dyddfwriaeth ei hunain. So felly, wrth ystyried y pethau ymarferol hyn, ni'n digon parod i gario ymlaen gyda'r trafodaeth.
Question 2, Russell George.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Mid Wales healthcare study?
Yes, following the study, the Mid-Wales Rural Healthcare Conference took place on the 12th of March, and this provided an opportunity to bring stakeholders together to highlight successful examples of solutions to rural healthcare problems and discuss what lessons could be applied to the middle of Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. I was pleased with that conference. It took place at Cefnlir Park near Newtown just a couple of weeks ago, and the conference and study quite rightly pointed out the strategic importance of bronglais. However, there was some concern following the conference that there was little reference to cross-border healthcare during the day, and concerns that a new border would be allowed to develop, which would effectively be through the centre of Powys. Can you, First Minister, give an assurance that the provision of healthcare in Mid Wales will take into account the whole of Mid Wales and that there will not be a line drawn through the centre of Powys?
There are no plans to draw a line down the centre of Powys. I can assure the member of that. And certainly we know that there will continue to be a number of patients from Powys who will access health services in England. And indeed, there is a flow that goes in the other direction as well. That is something that has always been the case. It's something the Welsh NHS pay for, and I do not see his constituents nor anybody else's constituents in Powys as refugees, a word that has been used, of course, unfortunately, by a member of his party in London.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog, ges i gyfle i fynychu'r gynadledd a oeddwn ni'n werthfawr iawn ac yn rhoi cyfeiriad pwysig i'r gwaith newydd yma o ran gynllunio iechyd yn y canolbarth. I barhau gyda'r momentum yma sydd ar waith nawr yn y canolbarth, aw wnewch chi ar ran eich gweinidog iechyd ymrwymo i ddarparu datganiad ysgrifenedig ddwywaith y flwyddyn mwyn cynnal y trylwyder a'r momentum a'r atebolrwydd o'r gwaith yma i'r gweinidog iechyd.
Fi'n siŵr bydd y Gweinidog Iechyd wrth gwrs yn barod i ateb cwestiynau ar y llinellau hynny yn y dyfodol. gaeth ddweud bod ymatebion wedi dod ymlaen i nawr o 3 o'r byrdde iechyd a hefyd o'r ymddiriedolaeth ambulans. A mae pob bwrdd wedi deall yr analysis wedi cael ei ddod i mewn i le gan astudiaeth ei hunain. Ac wrth gwrs mae Gweinidog yn ddiweddar wedi wedi apwynto 2 cyd-gydeirydd annibynnol i'r cydweithrediad iechyd ynglyn â'r canolbarth sy'n cael ei sefydlu ar hyn o bryd rhwng y 3 bwrdd iechyd a hefyd yr ymddiriedolaeth ambulans. A mi'n siŵr bydd y Gweinidog yn parhau i sicrhau bod aelodau yn gwybod beth yw'r camau nesaf ynglyn â'r astudiaeth a hefyd y gynhadledd.
We now move to questions to the party leaders, and first this afternoon, the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, just under 2 years ago, the Chief Executive and Chairman of Betsy Cadwaladr in the North resigned following a damning report from the Healthcare Inspectorate. At the time when the new board was put in place, the Health Minister here said when they were appointed, so that we can be confident that they are able to discharge their responsibilities effectively in the future. Now, responsibility of a board surely is to communicate and engage with the clinicians and the staff and patients that depend on their service or operate within the hospitals. Last week, we saw the BMA pass a vote of no confidence in the board. How can patients and the general public have confidence in the board in North Wales when the clinicians, who you yourself have said should lead reform of the health service here in Wales, are passing votes of no confidence?
Well, my understanding it was one part of the BMA that passed that vote of no confidence, not all of it, and certainly not all of the BMA in the whole of Betsy Cadwaladr. But I do welcome the fact that the consultants, following the invitation that the Health Minister and I issued, have come forward with plans. I welcome the fact that the Health Board now will consider those plans. It's early days yet in terms of how those plans can be made robust, but certainly I do very much welcome the fact that the consultants have come forward now with plans of their own.
It is welcoming that those plans have come forward, but it is a fact that a vote of no confidence was passed by clinicians yesterday in their own board area, not yesterday, last week, should I say, in their own board area. The Secretary of the BMA in Wales said that there remain poor communications between the board and the ward. Ultimately, you are the government. You are responsible for supporting the health board in that particular area. It is the biggest public body in Wales. We have seen previous poor reports about governance. We are seeing time and time again this issue arising in North Wales. And what we also see as well is from a senior director there, the medical director, Matthew Makin, saying that if we do nothing, we will simply be sleepwalking into disaster when he's talking about services at district general hospitals in North Wales. Who is correct? Are the clinicians right, or are the directors at board level right when they say they need to reconfigure services in North Wales?
Both right, because they're not in argument with each other. I mean, it is right to say that the medical director said there has to be change, certainly in the short term, and the clinicians have recognised that. They put forward an alternative. It's change nevertheless, but an alternative. It's a matter now for the Health Board to assess the alternative that they've put forward. But nobody is arguing that things can stay exactly as they are, not even, of course, the consultants, which is why they've come forward now with an alternative plan for the Board to consider.
And as I said, we welcome that alternative plan, and I hope there will be genuine consideration of that plan. But time and time again, we are seeing these issues arise in North Wales. As I said, this is the largest public sector body in Wales. It spends the biggest part of the public sector budget on health in North Wales, and you ultimately sign those checks and give the overall direction. Why should people in North Wales feel such a disconnect from their health board? And what will you be doing to drive forward a better sense of governance and a better sense of delivery in health services in North Wales so people can have confidence that the health service they require will be there for them in the future?
Well, two things. First of all, we expect, of course, the local health board to communicate with people as effectively as possible. It's important that people understand the issues. It's important that people understand what the options are as well. That is in any health board's interests. We have appointed a senior Welsh Government official who will be on the implementation board in order to be able to assist and help the board with its future deliberations on service delivery. And we expect, where boards are proposing changes in services, that those changes are fully explained and the public are fully involved in consultation before decisions are taken.
We now move to Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. I know, First Minister, you don't like to be reminded about your party's commitment to austerity, but I'm sure that you'll agree with me that people do deserve to hear what your intentions are. The Shadow Chancellor has said that he would not reverse the Tory budget, yet your party leader has said that the budget would be devastating to Wales. Who do you agree with?
Well, I do know that the difference between the election of a Labour government and a Conservative government is the difference between what is, admittedly, a small cut in public spending of about 2% and Conservative plans of a 20% cut in public spending. That is a substantial difference as far as the people of Wales is concerned.
So you refuse to come down one side or another on that particular question. Let me tell you, First Minister, Plaid Cymru believes that that budget cut will be devastating for Wales, and we maintain that our public services, our communities and our people simply cannot take any more cuts. Am I right in saying, First Minister, that further cuts to Wales's budget are palatable to you?
Well, no cuts are ever welcome, let's face it. But from our point of view, she asked me to come down on one side. I want to see the election of a Labour government in London. There we are. Let's come down on the side of what we want on these benches. We don't want to see 20% cuts in our finances over the next few years. We don't want to see a situation where there's a lack of investment in infrastructure. We don't want to see a situation where inequality widens. That is what we stand for as a party. And I know, of course, as a party, we are in a position of actually being able to form potentially a government in London.
But you'll change nothing. 250,000 workers in Wales earn less than the living wage. 16,000 fewer people are in employment this year as compared to last year. 70,000 people are underemployed. That's what austerity has delivered for Wales, First Minister. What will it take? How many more food banks? How many more closures? How many more punitive welfare reforms before you stand up to Westminster, First Minister? What will it take for you to tell London no more cuts?
Well, I mean, the difference is that I am in a position and my party's in a position to deliver on that, and she is not. The reality of the situation is that we Wales have seen unemployment drop, we've seen employment rise, we've seen more foreign direct, I know it's uncomfortable for them, more foreign direct investment than ever. Certainly more new foreign companies coming into Wales to invest in Wales than ever. Jobs around Wales being created. I contrast that when her party ran economic development for 4 years. When we did not see that being done, we did not see that level of investment coming into Wales, we did not see a situation where Wales was being sold around the world. And I will not take lessons in terms of ideas from a party who produced the thinnest manifesto at the last Assembly elections.
We now move to our final leader this afternoon. That's the leader of the Welsh Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, we all saw the disgraceful online abuse of referee Nigel Owens at the weekend, and it highlighted the extent of homophobic bullying in all walks of life. What work is your government undertaking to stamp out all forms of homophobic bullying in Wales?
Well, let me give the leader of the Liberal Democrats one example. I know that the Minister, Leslie Griffiths, has recently written to all the police and crime commissioners in order to promote the awareness of hate crime. And she has reminded them of their responsibilities to ensure that people are able to live their lives safely without homophobic bullying or indeed hate crime of any kind.
First Minister, one place where bullying is particularly prevalent is in our schools. And 90% of school staff recently surveyed by Stonewall Cymru reported incidents where pupils had suffered bullying and harassment for being or suspected of being lesbian, gay or bisexual. What steps is your government taking to ensure that homophobic, transphobic and biphobic bullying are eradicated in our Welsh schools?
Well, we are working with partner organisations to drive forward the Welsh Government's framework for action on tackling hate crimes and incidents that was published in May. That focuses on prevention, on supporting victims and, of course, on improving multi-agency working. We know, of course, that the issue of bullying is not simply what happens in school, but what happens online. Cyberbullying particularly, where I have seen examples where people will almost hunt as a pack in order to bully an individual. to that individual's great detriment, of course. And that is an issue that we expect to work with the police and other agencies over in order to be able to tackle it.
First Minister, Stonewall Cymru in their work tell us that teachers and school staff want the tools to tackle incidents of homophobic bullying, but they also need support in doing that. Ensuring schools have clear guidance and school behaviour policies is the first step, but it's vital that staff then have the tools to implement those policies and feel confident in doing so. How will you ensure that teachers, as well as pupils, feel confident and supported enough to challenge unacceptable behaviour of this nature, whether it happens in school to our children or whether it happens at home via online bullying that you've just talked about?
I would expect schools to ensure that teachers are able to recognise, first of all, bullying, whether it is bullying of a physical kind or abuse at school or cyberbullying. We would expect schools to have in place policies to deal with bullying of that kind, working with the local authorities who themselves should have those policies in place dealing with bullying in their schools. It's important that schools are able to access local authority advice and support in order to access training where they feel that's required for bullying of all kinds. And of course each secondary school at least has a counsellor who is able to recognise and give advice over bullying if children and young people go to see that counsellor. It's important, of course, that there is a proactive approach in identifying bullying. We can't rely on youngsters going to see a counsellor if they feel that they're not able to, that they don't want to do that. And there are many reasons why youngsters will not do that. But certainly we would expect schools working with local authorities to have policies and personnel in place to be able to recognise the signs of cyberbullying of all kinds, and particularly, of course, homophobic bullying.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Joyce Watson.
Diolch Llywydd. What assessment has the Welsh Government made of the UK budget?
We have made an assessment, and we can say that the UK budget has deepened the Chancellor's austerity programme, and more cuts will be passed on to Wales in the future.
Now the smoke has cleared to George Osborne's smoke and mirrors budget. Everyone sees what it is, shoddy electioneering. Within hours, it was shot to pieces. The Office for Budget Responsibility warned of a rollercoaster of deep cuts, a much sharper squeeze on spending than anything we've seen over the past year. Deeper cuts to police, defence and the Welsh grant. First Minister, we know that the Coalition's austerity programme has already robbed public services of £1.5 billion since 2010. What damage will further austerity programmes inflict on Wales should the coalition government find its way back into government?
Well, the plans the Chancellor outlined would have an enormous negative effect on Welsh public services, be it health or education, or indeed the provisions what local government provides through social care. There's no question about that. It is very much a smoke and mirrors budget. Its lead message seems to be the ability, for example, for pensioners with private pension funds to be able to access the money in those funds by selling their annuities. What they haven't said is that annuity, that the proceeds from that sale is taxable. And secondly, of course, there are fees to be paid to those who potentially would want to provide advice and buy those annuities. So once again, something that is claimed to be something that would be of advantage to pensioners carries with it an enormous amount of financial liability for pensioners.
Nick Ramsey.
Diolch. Well, First Minister, Joyce Watson is, of course, right in some respects, in that this budget does indeed contain a number of important cuts for people in Wales. A cut in the amount of taxation that people on the lowest income will pay by raising the personal allowance threshold to £11,000. Also, of course, a cut in the amount that motorists will spend when crossing the Severn Bridge, when there is that cut because of the VAT cut in the toll. And, of course, the abolition of the Category 2 phase for small vans. All of these are welcome cuts, I'm sure. First Minister, I'm sure you do agree with me more than you do with Joyce Watson that there are good elements to this budget. Nothing is perfect, but there are good elements, and that and this budget is a good deal for Wales and represents a far better budget than we had under the previous UK coalition government.
You mentioned the previous UK coalition government. I think that was in the 1930s, the national government. So I can't comment on that. His memory may go back longer than that, but certainly I can't comment on budgets that were passed at that time. But I mean, the point is this. I mean, he will not be surprised when I say I agree more with Joyce Watson than I do with him, clearly. There are elements of the budget that cannot be objected to. A reduction in Seven Bridge tolls is welcome, although it should have gone further. What does trouble me, however, is the fact that there is nothing about VAT. There are no commitments from his party not to raise VAT after the election. And VAT, as we know, hits the poorest hardest. It's a regressive tax where people pay a greater proportion of their income if they are poorer. And I notice that as we have seen tax cuts for the rich from the party opposite, they're silent about imposing new tax burdens on the poor. And I'll believe it when I see it. When he claims that his party is the party of tax cuts, given the burden they have imposed on so many people with an increase in VAT to 20% just after they were elected in 2010.
Alan Fred Jones. Alan Fred Jones.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n nodi sylwadau Mr Ed Balls na fydde'r Llywodraeth Lafur yn dad wneud dim ar y gyllideb smoke and mirrors yma y cyfeirwyd ati gan George Osborne. Ac ydych chi wedi cydnabod eich hun o dan gynlluniau llafur, petai nhw mewn Llywodraeth yn Llundain, mi fydde cyllideb Cymru yn crebachu dros 2% dros y 5 mlynedd nesaf yma. Rwan, mae'r fformula Barnett yma sydd wedi bod mewn bodolaeth ers cymaint o amser, wedi chreu gan lafur, wrth gwrs, ac yn dod â 400 pint y pen yn fwy i bobl yr Alban nag i Gymru. Beth ydy'r cyfiawnhad dros wario cymaint yn fwy yn yr Alban o gymharu ar hyn sy'n digwydd yng Nghymru?
Dos na ddim, fy marn i. Nid felly fydd y ban yr SNP, wrth gwrs, ond byddwn nhw'n gweud bod ddim yn ddigon i ddechrau. Ond ni'n croesawu'r ffaith bod na llawr nawr mynd i ddod mewn i rym. Dim yn gwybod eto pryd bydd hwnna yn digwydd, wrth gwrs, ond o leia mae'r egwyddor wedi cael i gytuno. Ond wrth gwrs, mae'n amser, mae wedi dweud, bydd rhaid i fformol baned cael ei adolygu mewn amser. Mae'n fe'n para am byth. Ac wrth gwrs, mae fe'n bwysig dros ben bod hwn yn rhywbeth sy'n cael ei ystyried yn y pen draw, ond mae rhaid ni wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod y llawd yn ei cynta mwyn adeiladu tuag at hwnna.
Prif Weinidog.
First Minister, I note, of course, Ed Balls has said he won't reverse anything which actually was agreed in the budget. But concentrating on this, the Barnett floor, which I think is very important for the Welsh Assembly, given that that has now been the principle that has now been accepted, is there in place a work programme or discussions about a work programme between Welsh Government officials and UK Government officials in terms of thrashing out the details of that floor and how that will be introduced in due course?
Well, we continue to have those discussions. The response is always it's a matter for after the general election. We don't know what the timetable is. We don't know what the value of the floor potentially, the nominal value of the floor potentially is to Wales. It's right to say the floor has been conceded. Well, not really. I mean, it's been conceded. That is something that was, to an extent, the case before. But it'll be important after May for whoever is in government in London to move forward now with the implementation of the funding floor to Wales, certainly as part of the process of ensuring that Wales gets the funding that Wales deserves.
Question 4, Rina, you're with.
Llywydd a wneud y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am adnoddau mewn ysbytai yng Ngogledd Cymru.
Wel, yn disgwyl wrth gwrs i'r holl ffyrdd iechyd darparu gwasanaeth diogel a chanaliadwy o fewn yr adnoddau sydd ar gael iddynt.
Can I draw the First Minister's attention to the situation at Ysbyty Penrose Stanley in Holyhead, where one of the 2 wards has been closed now for over 2 weeks because of staff absenteeism and the lack of staff to fill in behind them. The ward is not set to open for another fortnight until April the 13th, nearly 3 weeks in fact. Can I also draw the First Minister's attention to the situation in Ysbyty Gwynedd recently, where a constituent of mine was kept overnight recovering from an operation in a storeroom with his drip hanging from a peg on the wall and with a Victorian brass bell given to him to attract the nurses' attention. The nurses are doing a wonderful job in difficult circumstances. Does that sound to the First Minister like a well-resourced and well-managed NHS? And whilst the politics of austerity accounts for much of the under-resourcing, it does not excuse the mismanagement of the NHS by the Welsh Government.
Well, I mean, He has no evidence of that, but let's not get into that because we can show exactly. He has no evidence of that at all. I mean, there are two things here. First of all, he gives an example of a patient. If he wishes for that to be investigated, I'm sure that can be done. It's very difficult to comment on an individual's case. He does mention Ysbyty Penrose Stanley. 9 members of staff are not available for work. Some are retiring. There are others who are on short-term sick until the beginning of April. It's an unusual situation in that ward. There are so many off sick at the same time. And as a result of that, temporary measures have had to be taken. It's nothing to do with resources. It's to do with the unfortunate situation with regard to sickness absence at this present time in that hospital. Can I say to him that in terms of the average spend per head in Betsy Cadwallader, the spend is £1,582 per head. The Welsh average is £1,568 per head. So in fact, Betsy Cadwallader receives more money per head than, for example, the average spend per head in Wales. And we know that there will be examples, and he does draw my attention to an example in Holyhead. It is temporary, but there are particular circumstances in Ysbyty Penrose Stanley that apply there because of an unusual rate of temporary staff absence. It's a temporary situation, and all would want to see things return to normal as quickly as possible. With regard, of course, to an individual's circumstances, it's very difficult for me to comment, given the fact that I am not familiar with the full facts, but if he wishes to pass those on to me, of course I'd be willing to look at that for him.
Darren Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, yours is the only government that Wales has had which has made real-term cuts to the National Health Service, something that no Conservative Prime Minister has ever actually delivered to a National Health Service. Do you regret the record-breaking cuts which you have imposed, which have resulted in real terms decreases in the cash available to the National Health Service? Real terms decreases, of course, which have not taken place over the border in England, and where the NHS spending has been protected and increased in real terms in each and every year since the coalition government, which is led by the Conservatives, has been formed.
If his comments had any wit of truth, he might be able to explain why his own Prime Minister was heckled today at the Conference of Pensioners because of his performance on the NHS. He'd like to explain that to us, I'm sure. He comes out with this, and I search for a term here, but the term I think that's best applied is cobblers, about the what he claims is a record-breaking cut in the NHS in Wales. It's absolute nonsense. There's no figures to back up what he says. And he forgets, of course, well, I don't want a soprano-like intervention from the Leader of the Opposition. The reality of the situation is this. If you look at health and social care in Wales, and you cannot divorce one from the other, we are spending substantially more per head on health and social care in Wales than his party is in England. Social care in England is being devastated. Devastated. We see a huge increase in delayed transfers of care in England as a result of that. The reality is that spending in Wales per head is at least as high as in England. We know with regards with cancer drugs, we spend more per cancer treatment, more per head in Wales than is the case in England. That much is true. And we know that the Nuffield Trust themselves said that in fact there wasn't much difference, as they put it, between the health services of the 4 nations. And the reality is he keeps on coming out with this record-breaking stuff about the record-breaking cuts in Wales. The reality is this chamber has scarce seen such record-breaking nonsense.
Andrew Archie Davis, I've heard enough of your voice this afternoon. If you want to ask a question, and that goes to some of the others as well, if we can just listen to what the First Minister is saying and let the questioners have their opportunity. Aled Roberts.
Llywydd, dych chi wedi sôn am gwasanaeth diogel a cynaladwy, ond mae yna achosion yn y gogledd lle mae polisi'r deoniaeth yn creu anhawster. Enghraifft efo gwasanaeth ymamolaeth, mae deoniaeth yn mynnu, mae 1 ym mhob 11 ydi rota, sefyllfa sydd ddim yn ddilys yn unrhyw adran iechyd arall o fewn y deyrnas gyfunol. Felly, anewch chi fel llywodraeth herio rhai o'r polisi'r deoniaeth sy'n creu gwir bryder o fewn ardaloedd gwledig, lle I fod yn deg, fydd I ddim yn bosib I gynnal gwasanaeth os di polisi'r deoniaeth yn dod I rym.
Mae hwn yn rhywbeth wrth gwrs sydd yn papur gath I greu gan yr arbenigwyr, a rhywbeth wrth gwrs sydd yn rhan o hwnna, yn wneud y pwynt. Wel, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth wrth gwrs i'r dioniaeth I hunain, nhw wrth gwrs sy'n gyfrifol ynglyn â hyfforddi doctoried, ond beth hoffwn I weld, wrth gwrs, tra bod y Bwrdd Iechyd yn ystyried y papur sydd wedi dod o'r arbenigwyr, bod y dioniaeth yn rhan o'r ystyriaeth hynny, mwyn gweld os mae yna ffordd i sicrhau bod y papur sydd wedi cael ei roi yn gallu cael ei ddatblygu. Anodd i wybod ar hyn o bryd, achos mae'r papur newydd cael ei gyhoeddi. Ond wrth gwrs, bydde pawb moyn gweld yn un sydd mynd i sefyllfa lle, os mae fe'n bosib i parhau gyda'r gwasanaeth, ond ar hyn o bryd, wrth gwrs, mae'n rhaid ystyried y papur yn fanwl, ond fi'n derbyn bod hwnna'n bwysig i cael ei wneud yn y papur.
Question 5, Keith Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog roi'r wybodaeth diweddaraf am gynlluniau Llywodraeth Cymru i ehangu'r rwydwaith trafnidiaeth yng Ngorllewin Cymru.
Wel, byddwn yn cyhoeddi'r cynllun trafnidiaeth cenedlaethol yn y Gwanwyn, bydd hwn yn nodi ein cynigion ar gyfer buddsoddi mewn gwelliannau i drafnidiaeth yn y Gorllewin.
Diolch, Prif Weinidog. Ble ni nawr ar y cynlluniau trafnidiaeth i ddinas Rhanbarth y Gorllewin, wrth ystyried bod y reilffordd i Abertawe yn cael ei drydyneiddio a bod cytundeb ar IFA yn dod i ben yn 2019?
Wel, yn gyntaf i gyd, wy'n croesawu'r ffaith bod y gwasanaeth i gyfer ddim yn ei barhau. Yn credu falle bod dyma hof am bydd hwnna'n gorffen ar ôl trydyneiddio, ond y cynlluniau bydd hwnna'n parhau. Wrth gwrs, mae'n ni'n gofio bod y trenau ei hunain beth ni'n erbyn yw bydd tren yn cael ei glymu i'r tren trydan yn Abertawe mwyn mynd i'r Gorllewin. Mae'n bwysig i ddweud. Wrth gwrs, mae yna drafod bydd yn cael cymryd lle pan bydd y franchise yn dod i ben yn 2018 os gofiau. A ni mwyn sicrhau, wrth gwrs, bod y gwasanaeth sydd ar gael i'r Gorllewin i Abertawe mor dda ac yn well na beth sydd yn nawr.
Byron Davies.
Very much, Presiding Officer. Thank you for that last answer there, which leads me on to, given this investment of electrification by the Westminster Government, First Minister, and it's very evident, as people will see now west of Reading and indeed in Swansea. In terms of electrification of the main line, can you outline what added value the integrated transport plans you have for West Wales will bring, if any, and which would mean they can also capitalise from West Wales on this substantial important investment?
Well, first of all, an increase in services along the main line helps the stations further west. It provides more opportunities for connections from the western stations. And, of course, one of the areas that we're looking at is how we can better integrate bus services. We don't have control, as the member will know, of bus services. It's not always the case that there is proper integration of the modes between bus and rail transport, but having that power will enable us to make sure that there is the right level of connectivity between the railway stations acting as hubs and bus services coming into those railway stations. That's something I very much welcome as a result of the St David's Day process.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Daeth tua 100 o bobl i gyfarfod cyhoeddus nos Iau diwetha yn Gyfyrddin i drafod ail-agor reilffordd rhyw fath rhwng Cyfyrddin ac Aberystwyth o fan o patrwm cenedlaethol wrth gwrs i gysylltu Gymru gyfan. Fe gafodd gefnogaeth yn y cyfarfod cyhoeddus na gen unau, Roderick Glyn Thomas, dau ymgeiswyr seneddol llafur hefyd oedd yn bresennol. Mae'n amlwg fod yna ewyllus yn y Gorllewin a draws y pleidiau i weld a yw hwn yn gynllun dichonadwy ac oes modd wireddu rhywbeth fel hwn dros yr 20 mlynedd nesaf fel cynllun uchelgeisiol tymor hir i agor o Gorllewin i drafnidiaeth gyhoeddus a cysylltu trefi pwysig fel Cyfyrddin ac Aberystwyth lle mae'r iaith yn gryf ac yn dal i cael ei siarad. A oes modd felly i'r cynllun trafnidiaeth gyhoeddus a'r Gweinidog sydd wedi bod yn gefnogol hyd yma, mae rhaid gwaed, i edrych y sut allwn ni dechrau edrych ar astudio'r bosibiliad yma a gwneud hynny yn cyd-destun economaidd o Gorllewin a cyd-destun trafnidiaeth genedlaethol.
Na, fi'n gwybod bod y Gweinidog wedi bod yn gefnogol yr egwyddor. Fel mae'r aelod yn derbyn ei hunan, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth hollol hir dymor. Ynglyn â'r pris, mae yna rai mannau lle mae'r trac yn cael ei defnyddio enghraifft ganrif o y gwili. Mae'r trac nôl yna. Dyw'r trac ddim yna i'r Gorllewin o Gyfyrddin, gath yr hewl osgoi i adeiladu dros i'r Gorllewin. Mae yna bont eisiau yn Llambed yr enghraifft. Ond mae yna lot fawr o'r rwydwaith dal i fod yna. Wy'n credu beth sydd eisiau nawr yw sicrhau bod yna ddealltwriaeth o beth yn gwmws yw'r heriau ynglyn â dod i'r permanent way nôl mewn iddi le, a wedyn wrth gwrs faint bydd yn costi mwyn dod i'r trac nôl. Mae'n gofio wrth gwrs bod yn ymwneud sy'n cael ei ddatganoli ar hyn o bryd, ond y camau nesaf byddai gweld faint bydd yn costi, a hefyd beth sy'n gofio cael ei wneud mwyn sicrhau bod y rwydwaith yna yn gyfan gwbl i'r dyfodol.
Question 6, Simon Thomas, with I'm sure a shorter supplementary this time than last time.
Diolch Llywydd, peth yma'n bwysig. Pa wersi mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi dysgu o gynhadledd gofal iechyd y canolfath a gynhalwyd ar y 20fed o Fawrth?
Oedd y gynhadledd yn gyfle i ni ddod a ran ddeilied ynghyd mwyn tynnu sylw at enghreifftiau llwyddiannus o ddatrisiadau broblemau gofal iechyd yng Nghefn Gwlad ac wrth gwrs i drafod pa wersi gellid ei cymhwyso i'r canolbarth.
Diolch, Gweinidog. Fes i yn y gynhadledd yna ac o'n i'n canfod y gynhadledd yn un gadarnhaol iawn gyda nifer o enghreifftiau o arfer da wrth recrwtio a chadw meddyginiaeth mewn ardaloedd cefn gwlad dros y byd i gyd. Ac wy'n croesawu yn fawr iawn yr agwedd mwy ffres a bositif sydd gyda ni gan y Llywodraeth tuag at y canolbarth hyn y byd yn y cyd-destun hwn. Un peth na taw fi yn arbennig, sef bod ni wedi methu yn y gorffennol i recrwtio GPs. Enghraifft o'r 100% o llefydd hyfforddi yn Powys a Bonglais, 28 sydd wedi cael eu llenwi yn y 5 mlynedd diwetha. Oedd yna wersi da iawn ynglyn â recrwtio tymor hir mewn ardaloedd cefn gwlad, ac mae'n amlwg bod ni wedi trio fai o peth yma, ond heb llwyr wedi dysgu'r gwersi. Anwch chi ail-edrych ar sut i ni recrwtio yn ywedig yn ardaloedd cefn gwlad?
Newn ni, wrth gwrs, ac wrth gwrs, rhaid ni ystyried hefyd beth sydd wedi cael ei wneud mewn gwledydd eraill. O'n i'n darllen erthigol yn yr Economist wrthos diwetha, o'n siarad am beth wedi digwydd yng Nghefn Gwlad yr Almaen. Ni wedi dwyrain yr Almaen, lle mae lot fawr o symudiad bobl wedi bod ifanc i'r gorllewin. A ym mha ffordd yn wedi ystyried sut i sicrhau bod surgeries doctorau ddim yn cau, a wedyn bod y bod yn ffindo bod e ddim dyn nhw. Edrych ar enghreifftiau fyna i weld beth sydd wedi cael ei wneud fyna. Un o'r problemau mae doctorau yn gweud wrthyn ni yw y ffaith os mae doctorau yn eisiau mynd i'r cefn gwlad, felly maen nhw moyn swyddi iddi partneriaid, gwragedd, gwir, a felly beth sydd ar gael i nhw. So mae rhaid i ni ystyried beth sydd ar gael mewn ffordd holistig i'r tulu yn gyfan gwbl mwyn sicrhau bobl yn dod mewn i'r cefn gwlad fel y meddygon tulu. Ond mae'n werth edrych ar yr enghreifftiau sydd wedi cael ei ddod i mewn i le mewn ardaloedd eraill yn Ewrop hefyd.
George?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was also at the conference myself, and the First Minister will be aware that many of my constituents access healthcare from across the border in Shropshire. Now, the healthcare studies did seem to make little reference of some of the cross-border issues. And what I would like to ask First Minister is whether you would agree with me that it's not only the strategic importance of Bonglais that's important to the Mid-Wales population, but it's also the strategic importance of district general hospitals across the border in England that are also strategically important to constituents of Mid-Wales.
Well, nobody on this side of the border is suggesting that people who live in this constituency should all have to access services in Wales. We never said that. The only person who has ever questioned Welsh patients using the English NHS and Welsh NHS paying for those patients is Jeremy Hunt. And I can say clearly to him, and you know, it's important to state this, it has always been the case that Welsh patients have accessed services in England. We have always paid for patients to access those services because it's important that people are able to access good services as close to them as possible. And for many of his constituents, that does mean accessing hospitals in Shropshire. His constituents are not refugees. They are people who use the NHS in another part of the UK, and the Welsh Government pays for them.
Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Mid-Wales study put particular emphasis on good quality primary care and called for a renaissance of the community hospital model in securing services in rural areas. The good news is, First Minister, that the proposals to close Llanrwstyd surgery in August have been taken off the table, but in ensuring the long-term survival of such practices, we do need to make progress on the sustainability fund that has been agreed between yourselves and the Wales GPC. Could you give an indication when the sustainability fund and that process will be made available so that rural practices, especially branch practices that could be in danger of folding and therefore limiting access, could take advantage of the negotiations that you have secured?
I will ask the Health Minister to write to you with detail on that timescale. I very much welcome the fact that matters in Llanrwstyd seem to have been resolved.
Question 7, Claire Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Wnaeth y Gweinidog ddatganiad am y ddarpariaeth o drafnidiaeth i bobl sy'n defnyddio gwasanaethau mamolaeth yng Ngogledd Cymru?
Wel, rwy'n disgwyl i byrdau iechyd ddarparu'r drafnidiaeth briodol i gefnogi mynediad at wasanaethau mamolaeth ar draws y Gogledd, a bydd hwn yn sicrhau bod cymorth meddygol yn cael ei ddarparu cyn gyntyd a phosibl.
Diolch i chi am eich ateb. Mae asiantaeth cefnffyrdd Gogledd a Chanolbarth Cymru yn ddiweddar wedi coeddi bod nhw wedi delio gyda rhyw 10,000 o achosion yn y flwyddyn diwethaf. Llawer iawn o'r rheini'n ddamweiniau, cyngeir yn torri lawr oedd yn creu oedi a phroblemau hyd yr A55. Yr wythnos diwethaf, mi nath y Llywodraeth chi hunan gyhoeddi gorchymyn traffig dros dro. Fydde'n golygu wrth gwrs mwy o waith ar hyd yr A55 am y 12 mis nesaf. Nawr, tra mod i'n derbyn wrth gwrs bod yn rhaid gwneud gwaith cynnal a chadw ar hyd yr A55 yn achlysurol, a newch chi dderbyn fod yn oblygiadau yn hynny o beth i'r trefniadau arfaethedig i wasanaethau mamolaeth sydd yn gwneud y gwasanaethau yna yn llai diogel.
Wel, yn gyda gyd, wrth gwrs, bydde unrhyw newidiaeth ynglyn â unrhyw gwasanaeth ynglyn â mamolaeth yn gynnwys safety gateway, mwyn sicrhau bod na bobl yn gwybod bod y trefnidiaeth wedi mynd i fod yn iawn ac yn briodol, a mae hwnna'n ran allweddol o unrhyw datblygiadau yn y dyfodol. Ar hyn o bryd, wrth gwrs, ni'n gwybod bod y papur yn nawr wedi dod o'r arbenigwyr yn ysbyty Glan Clwyd. Mae'r Bwrdd Iechyd wedi gweud bod nhw'n mynd i ystyried y papur hynny, ac wrth gwrs gan i weld felly beth yw'r cynlyniad o hwnna.
Mark Isherwood?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's now 3.5 years since the Welsh Government launched its strategic vision for maternity services, and despite proposals by Betty Cadwallader Health Board then to downgrade at least one of their maternity units to midwife-led without protecting consultant-led services, raising concern that lives could be put at risk by forcing pregnant women to travel further to give birth. So more than 3.5 years when doctors and midwives were warning against this. How do you respond, therefore, to the statement today by the leader of the campaigners in North Wales, commenting on the postponement of the removal of doctors in the midwifery unit in Glan Clwyd? And she says, I still feel the health minister needs to put special measures in place to protect the community.
It's very unclear as to what special measures would deliver, actually. What's important is there's no proposal on the table from the consultants. And it's now important that the Health Board have the opportunity to consider that paper, and they have indicated they will do that and postpone any proposals for a further fortnight. And it's important that full consideration is given to that paper. Bear in mind, of course, that the announcement has already been made that the Glan Clwyd site will be the site for the Cyflwynir. That can only be of assistance to people living in that area, a very specialised unit, something potentially, and I note this from the paper that the doctors themselves, the consultants themselves provided, has the potential to be a world-class centre, and I very much welcome that. It is inevitable, though, that with the establishment of a very specialised centre on the Glan Clwyd site, that there is bound to be an effect on the other maternity sites of some kind across the Betsy Cadwallader area. So the next stage now is to examine, for the Health Board rather, to examine the paper that's been put forward by the consultants in order to examine its robustness, obviously, and to see whether their proposals are practical.
Question 8, Alan Roberts.
Diolch Llywydd. Am wnaeth y Prif Weinidog roi'r wybodaeth ddiweddara am drafodaethau a'r brotocol newydd ar gyfer gwasanaethau iechyd trawsffiniol rhwng Cymru a Lloegr.
Wel, does yna'n protocol newydd yn cael ei ddatblygu?
Dwi'n deall bod y protocol presennol ar fi'n cael ei ail drafod yn ystod y flwyddyn sydd i ddod. Mae adroddiad y pwyllgor dethol ar faterion Cymreig wythnos dwytha yn deud bod yna ddiffyg trafod rhwng cynghorau iechyd cymunedol a byrddau iechyd rhwng Cymru a Lloegr ynghylch rhai o'r newidiadau trawsffiniol. Er enghraifft, gwasanaethau mamolaeth yn cael ei trosglwyddo o'r Amwythig i Telford. Hefyd, y ffaith bod Bwrdd Iechyd Betsy Cadwallader ddim wedi trafod efo Countess of Chester ynglyn â capacity yna ynghylch y newidiadau. Felly, anewch chi'n siŵr bod materion sydd wedi cael ei codi yn adroddiad y pwyllgor dethol yn cael ei ystyried wrth i chi drafod y protocol newydd yma efo Llywodraeth Prydain. Wel,
mae yna protocol mewn lle, wrth gwrs. Beth sy'n digwydd, a mae hwnna'n digwydd yn aml, yw mae yna adolygu yn cymryd lle o'r protocol ei hunan, mwyn sicrhau bod y protocol yn berthnasol a bod yn cael ei datblygu yn y ffordd iawn. Mae yna drafod yn cymryd lle, a mae'r trafod yna wastad wedi cymryd lle rhwng Llywodraeth Cymru a hefyd yr adran iechyd yn Lloegr, mwyn sicrhau bod y protocol ei hunan yn cael ei wella ac i newid wrth gofio'r amgylchiadau fel maen nhw'n newid dros y blynydde.
Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you. I'd actually like to endorse a clear and concise protocol coming forward. I know that several of my constituents, when needing treatment over, and it's very specialist treatment that is not available in North Wales, but they become sort of embroiled in a trap, really, because although they require the treatment, the funding doesn't always follow them, and then there becomes this delay. Would you endorse some kind of protocol that actually will ensure that the constituents can actually access this specialist treatment without delay, and that there is a process in place also to ensure a smooth transition of service back when constituents have had their treatment and they need follow-on support back in North Wales?
Well, not of that being an issue any more than it's an issue when we take patients from England into Wales. The Burns unit at Morrison being an example of that, for example, where that acts as a tertiary unit for the southwest of England as well. There should be no difficulty with patients accessing services in England, nor people from England accessing services in Wales. It's a well-established principle that where those patients access treatment, the money follows from either side of the border.
Well, First Minister, the Welsh Affairs Committee report points out that the exchange of information between the NHS in England and Wales is not good enough and works against patients' interests. So what progress is being made during this review to make the electronic information systems in Wales compatible with those in England?
Well, we believe the problems are actually more on the English side rather than on our side, but the discussions are ongoing, and any issues that the committee has the Westminster Committee has identified will, of course, form part of any discussions.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to the next item on